So welcome everyone to the Fort Bend County Landscape Success Class, Growing a Great Lawn, Part 2. Today's class will focus on turf development, insect control, and weed management. My name is Rochelle Levan, and I've been a Master Gardener since 2022, and I am the program host for today's class. We also have other Master Gardeners, other helpers in the background helping with other things. We have Nancy and Susan. And these classes, the Master Gardeners put on these classes along with the Texas A&M AgriLife Extension for this Landscape Success Program, which is a 6-class online program aimed at helping the home gardener create and maintain a beautiful home landscape. And by popular demand, we have added this part 2 for growing a great lawn. So we will be recording this. It's already begun. We ask as a reminder that you mute yourself and turn off your video. If you have any questions as we go through the presentation, please enter them in the chat and we will answer them as we go through the video or as we go through the presentation. Today, back with us, we have Boone Holiday, who is our Fort Bend County Extension Agent in Horticulture for Texas A&M AgriLife Extension. He holds an undergraduate degree in horticulture from Stephen F. Austin State University and a master's degree in agricultural education from Texas A&M University. Long before attaining these degree titles, he was an avid gardener and young plant enthusiast. Having work experience in many horticultural industries from retail horticulture to landscape design and irrigation installation, he brings that knowledge paired with enthusiasm into Fort Bend County programming efforts. He is happily married to his wife, Sony, and is a proud father to his daughter, Bailey, and currently resides in Fulshear, Texas. So Boone, you have the floor.
I have to do this. There we go. Sorry about that. Thank you, Rochelle. Appreciate it. And I appreciate everybody coming back for round 2. We had just a ton of comments after last class that we just had to rush through the back end of the presentation, and that ended up being the section that people needed the most help with. So we threw this together. So I really appreciate our team of Master Gardeners who helped to pull this off in a 2-week time frame to get this on the calendar so that we can finish up and get through the rest of the material. Again, we'll try to do a similar format that we did for the last session. If you have questions during the presentation, put those in the chat feature, type those in there. We've got a couple of our team members wrangling behind the scenes. If it is a question that's popping up several times, or if it looks relevant, Rochelle will chime in and ask that question, and we'll try to expand upon that a little bit more. I will try to go a little bit faster this time so that we can kind of run through this content of weeds, insect and disease, and have some time at the end where we can kind of relax a little bit. You can ask those questions. And I also want to go through a couple of the online resources that we have that will really, if you don't know about these, you'll appreciate it because this will give you some places to go visit to answer your questions as you move forward. I'm going to try here to get my screen shared. Okay. And that thing. And we're going to go here from beginning. Okay. Now let's see here real quick if I can figure out how to do this again. I'm going to move that bar up there out of the way. Okay. All right. Can you see my screen okay?
Yes.
Fantastic. Okay. So as I mentioned here, the materials that we're going to be covering today are going to be about our common lawn problems that we're all dealing with. the last couple of years have been a roller coaster of environmental extremes, you might say, of freezes, of heat waves, of droughts, of floods, uh, just any type of thing that Mother Nature can throw at us. It's been thrown readily, and this has a significant impact on plant materials, and with our lawns, especially, are sensitive to stress, and just the amount of stress that has been put on our plates. It's been hard on our lawns, and the outcome to that is that we start seeing things skewed as far as the health and vigor of our turf grass. And so we're starting to see all these issues with weed competition and with populations of insects and disease pressure. So we're going to go through these, kind of go over some of the common stuff that we're seeing, and I'll give you some ideas of how we can remedy those issues. Okay, so I want to leave this in here again because I think this is really important with our turf grasses here. Is this bottom diagram where we got the maroon there that says warm season growth calendar. And this is typical of all of our southern warm season lawns, whether you have St. Augustine, whether you have Bermuda, Centipede, Zoysia, Paspalum, they're all in the same category where we have a grass that wants to grow while it's warm, hot, and we're getting adequate rainfall. The rest of the year going into winter, this is a warm season grass species that wants to go dormant. It wants to sit there in a dormant state. The top wants to turn tan or brown. The roots want to slough off of the plant, and it wants to rest. And then once the temperature starts warming back up in spring, we get warm temperatures, the soil temperature is warming, we're getting rainfall, the root system starts to reestablish, and so does the top part of the plant. So this is important when we're dealing with all the issues of our warm season turf grasses, whether it's fertility problems, whether it's insect problems, disease, or weeds. It has to do with this growth calendar and maybe inputs that we're putting onto our lawns that aren't necessary for the grass, and maybe actually helping to encourage all these issues. Okay, so while we have a grass that wants to go dormant, that's sitting there over the cooler months of the year, if we're fertilizing or if we're watering or if we're applying some additional chemical inputs, we're really not doing anything there to help the grass. We're probably encouraging disease. We're probably helping these insects to thrive. And we're encouraging a whole lot of weeds, a whole lot of weed pressure that's not really necessary. So definitely always keep this in mind. You know, I can envision this being blown up and put on a wall as a big painting. It would look fantastic in a living room, but if that's over extreme for you, at least, you know, get to understand this growth calendar for our warm season turf grasses. So let's dive into these common lawn problems. And the fact that everything within this is a system. And, you know, if one of these variables gets skewed, then we start to see things kind of fall apart. Grass is a living organism and it's prone to stress. And so once that plant is stressed, just like us, you know, when we're dealing with too much stress, we become weak. We become more prone to having a cold symptoms. Whether if we're healthy and we're strong, and we're vigorous, we're going to be able to better fight off some of these external issues. And we could think of a grass as the same thing. That if it's getting everything that it needs and it's healthy and happy, it's going to fight off a lot of these problems better than it was if it was stressed and in some type of a shock. So again, these are things that we need to be thinking about that are going to impact the health of our plant. One is going to be a pH that's off balance. Going back to the first class, we're talking about a pH between 6.5 to 7.0 is our optimum range of pH. Once we get below that in acidic, or once we start getting above that in alkaline, then our plants are struggling because they're not able to uptake nutrients properly. Our imbalances in fertility, if we're adding certain nutrients that maybe we don't need, or maybe we have a deficiency in very important nutrients for the plant's health, this is going to impact the quality of the plant growth. Water, a drought or lack of water is equally as important to looking at overwatering. If we have too much water, this is probably worse than having not enough water for the health of our turf grass. So compaction, if this heavy clay soil that we have becomes very dense and we don't have air pockets in the soil to allow oxygen down to the root system and movement within the soil of air and water, then our plant's going to not do very well. Improper mowing height, if we're letting it get too tall and it gets thatchy, we're going to have some disease problems. If we cut it too short, we're going to stress the plant out. It's not going to have a sufficient root system. And then we may be encouraging weeds because of that access of sunlight or sun penetration down to the soil surface. Excessive shade. None of these warm season turf grasses are shade loving. Some of them are shade tolerant. So we have to understand the difference between a shade loving plant and a shade tolerant plant is that they don't really want to be in the shade, but some species can handle it better than others. But ultimately, if we have a situation where we have just total shade coverage, we're just not going to get the grass to grow. And the last one here is a high salinity. If your water supply, whether it's municipal water or if it's well water, if there's a lot of salts in that water and you're constantly applying it through irrigation, you start to get those salt buildup within the soil, and the turf is going to decline with that increased salt level. So all these things are equally as important. If one of these is out of whack, the system is skewed and the plant is not going to perform very well. So addressing these first is going to help you when we get into looking at the insect disease and weed pressure issues. Okay. We can continually throw a bunch of products, fertilizers and insecticides and fungicides and weed killers. We can throw all this stuff at the grass all day long. But if we haven't addressed these things first, we're just throwing money and chemicals into the ground, and we just don't support that. Let's look at these cultural things that we can fix first, and then that's going to help us do a better job. It's going to be better for the environment because we're not going to have all these chemicals leaching off into the water supply. And it's going to be a lot better on your pocketbook because you're not at the box store every weekend in line buying a bunch of chemicals, spending your hard-earned money, just throwing it out in the yard. So this is, taking an integrated approach to this is understanding how all this works together and focusing on, the base level, these cultural things that we can fix first, and then just kind of moving up from there as we have to start dealing with issues and getting those straightened out so that the whole system works the way we want it to. This one here, again, we're looking at the coloration of the leaf blades, noting that we have too much shade in this area. We get a lot of calls here pretty regularly about people, that have live oaks is probably the number one tree that we have problems with is, this constant fight of how do we have the live oak tree and how do we have the turf grass there? But it's a hard conversation because there's, maybe the HOA is saying you have to have grass there. Or maybe it's a tree that you really enjoy having that shade. But at some point, all this stuff just doesn't work. And going in and cutting back the tree every 2 or 3 years, aeration to the lawn to break up the soil, extra water and fertility on the turf. There's only so much that we can do, but once that excessive shade becomes too much, we can continually beat this tree up. We can continually add additional inputs to this turf grass, but it's not going to work. So something's got to give there. You're probably not going to get rid of the tree. So it might mean that we need to be realistic about maybe moving the parameters of that turf grass plot further out away from the base of the tree, out maybe where there's a little bit more sunlight on the edges of the canopy of those trees, where we can grow grass successfully. Underneath those trees, we don't have a million answers, but usually it's going to be mulched areas, or it's going to be a low input ground cover that is more shade tolerant than the turf grass species is. And then we get questions on, which grass. Really for us, St. Augustine grass, in general, not really dependent on the variety, is going to be our most shade tolerant. Some of the broadleafed or the japonica, the zoysia species that have the wider leaves and the taller, thicker texture to the foliage, it's going to be probably next in line as far as the shade tolerance. But then we go through centipede grass, and then we eventually get to Bermuda grass that just really does not handle shade whatsoever before it starts getting really thin. And you start getting competition from weeds growing in those areas. And then eventually these trees, we're looking at a live oak, a southern live oak tree. And this is a tree that, you might have 2 of them in your front yard. That's 500 square foot in space. And we have a tree that its natural footprint can be up to, 75 foot or 100 foot in diameter. It's not going to get any smaller. It's going to get bigger every year. And so we have to be cognizant of that problem that you have now, next year is going to be worse. Next year after that, it's going to be worse. So, there's only so much we can do as far as thinning the tree canopy out, raising the cutting height of the grass so we have a little bit more canopy on there of the grass, before we have to start looking at removing that grass and replacing it with a shade tolerant ground cover or a mulch. Rochelle, how are we doing in there? We have any questions so far?
No questions so far. We're good.
Oh, okay, awesome.
Thanks.
So we've all seen this one here. This is, in the cool season, usually once the temperature cools off in fall or in early spring, when the grass starts to green back up again, we see these and alien landing strips around the yard of these donuts, circles, or interconnecting circles of discoloration, whether it's yellow or brown. And this is what the scientific community calls large patch. You would know this probably as brown patch. And this large patch disease is a fungal disease. And basically we have a fungus, which is a mushroom, grows in the soil and feeds off of this grass through the stolons and the root system of the grass, basically just kind of robbing it of nutrients. And that's just part of its life cycle, is that it needs a host to feed off of. But the good thing about large patch for us is that it needs moisture and it needs cool nights. Okay, so when we get into June through September, we're not gonna see a cool night. We're not gonna see one cool night. So, so that part of the disease triangle kind of goes away. And the other thing that this thing needs is moisture to thrive. And so what we know about June through September in our region is that it's pretty dry, tends to be pretty dry. So both of those growing conditions kind of go away. So the good thing about this large patch is we see it in the fall once the temperatures get cool. We see it in early spring while it's still cool, but then the rest of the year just goes away. Um, so people fight with us every day during these time periods because they want to know the type of fungicide that they need to go get and how to kill this stuff. Well, we can we can be patient and we can do two things. We can cut back on our watering. This happens to be a time of the year where our grass does not really need additional irrigation. So we can cut the irrigation systems off and um, we can refrain from fertilizing the lawn during those time periods. In the cool part of the fall and then the cool part of early spring, we don't need to be fertilizing the grass. What we end up doing is we're watering, we're fertilizing, we're creating this growth of grass while this disease is active, and it creates this situation where that grass can really take advantage of that susceptible turf grass and infect it. So if we can cut back on the water, and if we can cut back on the nutrients and the growth of the plant, then we can really just get rid of this disease. So it's just cutting back on those inputs and you can watch it go away. People that, I go visit a home and I see a lawn with a ton of brown patch and the circles are all over the place. When I walk across that lawn, it's like a swamp. It's just mushy. The ground's just soggy, saturated, and that kind of sums it up right there. Okay, so turn the water off, uh, refrain from fertilizing from the fall to from until the warm part of spring, and then this will go away. Um, we rarely want to look at fungicide for this. Um, if you had a botanic garden or a golf course, or this is the headquarters of a neighborhood facility, and you have these big, large patch circles out there, a fungicide, maybe something that they would want to use just for the aesthetics of it, of minimizing that. But really, for homeowners for this particular disease, we're just not talking about application of fungicide, just cutting back on the water and cutting back on the fertilization during the cool season. Let's see here. We're gonna get rid of low-lying areas. So if we've got, and it usually tends to be a spot that's between the houses, um, where, the ground kind of goes out and these are set up for maybe drainage in between two properties. If we don't have that tapered off where the water can shed off in either directions, we tend to get spots that stay wet right there. And those tend to be spots that we're reoccurring. We're seeing these disease issues pop up because it doesn't drain very well. So either find a way to taper that soil off both directions, or you might have to come in there and do some type of a work of a French drain or like a rock riverbed or something where that water can move into and move different directions and get out of those spots that just want to hold water all the time and decrease this watering on here. So again, a lot of fungicide options out there. And if I was, working um, as a professional groundskeeper and I've got a grand entrance to a neighborhood facility or the head house of a golf facility, or a sports field complex that needs to be immaculate, fungicides as a preventative to this would be a good idea. But for a homeowner situation, I think that it's a waste of money. All right, any other questions about large patch or brown patch?
No questions so far.
Okay, so this one here is the monster. And when I started working here in Fort Bend just about 12 years ago, our state pathologist basically said that we didn't really have this disease in our area. Started seeing some samples come into our office that kind of the symptoms looked like this disease. Went out several different spots to identify it, and ended up started sending some samples to our pathology lab, and sure enough, we were seeing take all root rot. So it's been here. It's been an issue that we've been dealing with. And I really think that since Hurricane Harvey, where we just were inundated with rainfall, a lot of localized flooding, from that point forward, we've seen a lot of this one. And you may have this spot in your yard and you're just like, what is going on with this? It may be this, and we call it take all root rot, or it could be take all root decline, would be another name for it. But basically, it's another fungal pathogen. But this one, as you see in this picture here, it's a little bit more irregular, where the large or the brown patch is pretty circular or donut shaped, very geometric. This one kind of moves around in different directions. It doesn't really have that perfect circle shape to the outside perimeter. And you'll see it where it's just kind of pops up. You put a lot of inputs in the area, it looks like it's healthy. And then the next season, once it starts warming up, you start seeing these patches start to die out again. The difference between this and the large patch is that this one, you really see the symptoms in the summertime. So once the grass gets stressed out because of moisture stress, it's not able to take up enough water, then it starts showing the symptoms. The grass turns kind of yellowy, and then you get these irregular patches that start dying or thinning out. And then in the fall, cools off, we start getting rainfall, then those areas might perk back up. And then you don't see that again till the summer of the following year. This one is tough because we don't really have the cultural answer. You can address this with just inputs as far as additional watering during stressful times or drought times, a little additional fertilization in there to help the grass kind of work through the disease. But without any additional care, the grass is going to eventually decline and die out in spots. So this one, there's a picture here that kind of shows eventually what it starts doing. It just starts thinning out. You get a little bit of patchy growth in there, but at some point, all that stuff in the middle there is going to die out. And then it maybe starts spreading around the yard a little bit, and it might eventually kind of take up the whole space. It's something that's very slow, so it's not an overnight thing. So something like a chinch bug that kills a whole lot of area very fast, like over a week. This one's very slow. So what it does is it gets inside the grass. Here's kind of another picture of it up close, but here's kind of what happens is it gets in the grass at these points, and it kind of just clogs up the vascular system. So it's like if you took a straw and you squeeze the straw and you tried to take a drink of water. The more you squeeze the straw, less water you get. So it's kind of the idea with this disease is that it alone doesn't really kill the grass, but it stunts it so that the grass is really having a much harder time growing and also dealing with environmental stress. Here's a real close picture, and you see this black on the sides of the stolon. That's the kind of the necrotic tissue as the mycelium of this fungus has grown into that stolon of the plant, and then starts to work its way down to the root system, starts to decline the roots. So what do we do for this thing if this sounds like that's that monster that you've been seeing in your yard? First thing I would do before these three things here is get the diagnosis, a positive diagnosis of this pathogen. Okay, and I'll show you at the end of the presentation where we can do that. Basically, we have a plant pathology lab in College Station. You take a piece of this grass that looks terrible, you put it in a bag, and we send it to the lab with a small fee, and they run it through their microscopes, and they're gonna find what's going on with it. And if it comes back to you and it says, congratulations, we found that your grass has take all root decline, then we need to respond appropriately to eliminate that, or maybe to deal with it. If it comes back and it says, this looks like maybe just some grub damage, well, that's great, because that's a lot easier to remedy than this thing. And I say that, I think you go through a little bit of time to dig it up, send it in, pay the fee to get the diagnosis, because the next thing is the fungicides. This one, you need to use a fungicide to get rid of this disease. And the specific fungicides that are practical and useful for this disease are kind of expensive. You know, they're not something we're going to a box store and we're spending $10 of something off the shelf. We're looking at a product that's probably going to start off about $70 or $80 for an amount that can do a lawn 2 or 3 times. So that's a little prohibitive to somebody. We're looking at a reoccurring cost of that. So I wouldn't want that person to just go straight out and buy that expensive product and apply it if we don't need it. But if it comes back that they find the take all patch in the grass, you really just, you need to use the fungicides, follow the application label, and eventually we can get this disease under control. In some situations, if the grass is just barely holding on, there's just little sprigs of it here and there, you may need to go ahead and just wipe that surface off and replant with new sod. And I've heard people do that to some success. I've also heard where they've replanted the grass and then 2 years later, that disease shows back up again because of the persistence of it in the soil. I've heard of people using organic matter, where some type of top dressing of peat moss, or you know, a full range of just organics supplements that cause a little bit of microbial action in the soil that might fend off of this particular pathogen. But it's a combination of the fungicides, of organic matter, of resodding those areas that are really impacted, and then kind of targeting water and fertilization at the right times to ensure that the grass stays healthy. It mostly impacts St. Augustine grass, but it can switch over to Zoysia and Bermuda. So there's not really a whole lot of benefit of switching over to another species. This particular pathogen will take all, no pun intended, all types of southern grasses. So again, you know, if I go to a box store and buy a fungicide for turf grass, those products are probably not going to work. They're not going to be effective for this disease. We're going to need to go online, identify specific active ingredients that work pretty good on this, and follow the label, on when to apply, reapplication of it to make sure that we're, you just don't put it out one time and expect that the job's over. This is a thing where we have to come back in intervals, reapply and reapply until that particular pathogen is gone. And then we've got the question marks on the peat moss or other organic additions. I think this is beneficial. Anything we can do beyond just looking at chemicals is a good idea. We look at this integrated approach. I think we can get this under control, but it is a tough one. And the last one here is what's called St. Augustine decline. And this is a virus-based disease that really just the grass just starts growing kind of thin, sparse. It doesn't have much vigor. As you can see on this leaf blade here, we start to see some mottling of yellow on the foliage. So we got two tactics with this. One is replace the sod with a newer variety that's resistant to this virus, or we can focus on just the health of the plant, of having all these inputs the way that the grass wants, as far as water, fertilization, aeration, dethatching, doing everything we can do to ensure the health of the plant. It can kind of grow through this particular virus. But if we're not doing anything to help the grass and it's stressed and it's struggling, this virus eventually is going to just cause the turf to decline to the point where you might not have much grass and you might end up having a lot of weeds.
Boone,
So,
quick question.
yes, please.
So what about well, just your thoughts. Maybe you have some hacks, but where dogs have destroyed the grass, eating or doing other things on it. Any ideas or hacks regarding that?
Probably just the most obvious.
Yes.
Just, have an area of the yard, that may be designated to the dogs. Then having an area that maybe you try to keep them off of so it's more enjoyable for you. But the foot traffic of dogs, they're very pattern oriented. So there's just not much you can do about that. They're running to the fence and they like to run up and down the fence and bark at the neighbor. You can't do anything to fix those spots. They're going to be there. It's going to constantly be compacted. And the other one is just defecation and urination. The uric acid that's in their waste, basically it's just concentrated nitrates and salts, and it just burns the grass. So, the things that they're doing are directly competing with the health of the grass. So just finding ways to, minimize access of those pets to certain spots that maybe be your priority areas that you want to look nice, and then maybe fence off an area and let them kind of have dominion in the side or the rear part of the yard. But no, there's not really any easy solutions to do that, because we can try to fix what's wrong there now. But if that pet keeps coming back, that's a reoccurring issue, and so we just never really make any traction with it.
Right. Why would they be eating the grass or the dirt? Is it something?
I'm not a
Enjoyable?
veterinarian, but I've heard that sometimes, pets, they kind of have a feeling that dietary needs aren't being met. And so maybe there's a deal where they're trying to source more fiber, or it might just be a kind of a nervous habit. Some dogs just do that and then they end up regurgitating the grass. So I don't know all the answers there.
Yes.
It probably is just being out there with them just to make sure that they're not acting up.
Okay.
All right, let's roll into weeds here. This is going to be a big one. This is probably the biggest thing I've been hearing. It's just, I got weeds, I got weeds, I got weeds. So part of this is just be practical. You're not going to get rid of all the weeds, or a weed is basically by definition is an undesirable plant. So as the plants that we don't want to have growing where our grass is, we're not gonna get rid of all of them. So we just try to manage the turf in a way that we have tolerable levels of weeds in the grass and just be okay with that. Okay, we're not, we're homeowners. We have a yard to take care of. It's not our business. It's not a thing where this has to be perfection. So let's be realistic and just be okay with some tolerable population of weeds. Just trying to have steps that we do to minimize that, but just know that we're not going to get all of them. Things to understand, particularly around the areas of herbicides. When we go to the garden centers, when we're on the TV and radio commercials, it's it just jumps straight to weed killers. But we need to really understand these weed killers because we could be misapplying them. That's not going to help our grass, but we may be doing worse. We may be unintentionally harming ourselves, our pets, or non-target plant species such as trees and shrubs. So the first one is understanding the label where it says selective herbicide versus broad spectrum. The selective means that that particular product is going to try to kill one thing and maybe try to keep another plant safe. Okay, and this would be like a broadleaf weed killer for lawn. So it doesn't necessarily kill the grass, tries to keep the grass safe, but tries to kill these broadleaf plants. If it says broad spectrum, then that's a general herbicide that basically wants to kill every plant that it touches, or it tries to kill every plant that it touches. So we need to understand the difference because if we take this broad spectrum weed killer and we go out on our lawn and spray the weeds, we're killing the grass as quick as we are killing those weeds. The other one is understanding the difference between a pre-emergent and a post-emergent herbicide or weed killer. Pre-emergent means that we're putting a chemical on there that's impacting the germination or the growth from the seeds of those weeds that are in the soil. So we're trying to stop those seeds from growing in the first place. Post-emergent means that that seed has already germinated or grown. It's already up and visible, and we're trying to target that evident weed that's there in the lawn with some type of a product. So we're either killing it, trying to kill it or stop it from growing before it grows, or we're trying to eradicate that after the fact. And then we need to look at the products, the active ingredients, particularly stuff that has maybe 2,4-D or dicamba. For broadleaf weed controls, we need to understand that trees and shrubs are broadleaf plants. So it's those particular products are trying to kill broadleaf plants or weeds. They're going to try to kill our trees. So I pulled up, and I'm not going to show you these labels on here, but there's just commonly available herbicides that you would find at your garden centers or box stores. This is a granular weed killer for the lawn that says do not allow granules to come in contact with flowers, ornamental shrubs or trees, or other desirable broadleaf plants as serious plant injury may occur. Okay. This next one here, similar product. Gosh, I can't read it. Where did it go? It says, do not use under trees, shrubs, bedding plants, flowers, or garden plants. Okay. So in those types of situations, these selected products that maybe have 2,4-D, dicamba, or others that are used for broadleaf weed control will try to kill our trees and shrubs. So I don't know a whole lot of people that have grassy lawns that don't have trees or large shrubs in the vicinity. So basically the concept here is that as we water these products into the soil, if they're absorbed by trees and shrubs, it could try to kill them. Okay. Or at least it's going to negatively impact those plants. So then we're starting to talk about a phone call that we get, what's going on with my tree, Why is my tree dying? Why are the leaves dropping out of my tree? So be cognizant of that. Reading the label of any type of herbicide is very important. They put that on the label for a reason, okay? That you understand that will have a negative impact on these other desirable plants, but it's also to cover liability when you misapply those products. So always read the labels. All right, so great ways to get rid of weeds post-emergent. Hand trowel. We got one of these cool little tine weeders here to pull those up. This is pretty good. If you maintain a good, healthy lawn, we get, a little patch of weed here and there, and there's maybe one over there on that side. There's really no reason that we need to go out and sling a whole bag of weed killer granules, or we need to spray the lawn with weed killer. If we're only looking at maybe a task that would take us 30 minutes to do by hand, I'd encourage you to try to do that. Mowing those areas to keep them from growing to seed. There's other strategies here beyond chemicals to try to remove those weeds before they get out of hand. So let's look at grassy weeds first. This one right here is called Bahia grass, and this is a native grass species. We see it has the seed head, has this little peace sign seed head on it, and it's not really bad. The problem with this plant growing into our lawns is that as it gets thick, you're constantly having to mow these little seed pods down. But I would say maybe be okay with it. But if you're starting to notice little patches of that growing into the lawn, you can spot spray with some selective herbicides, such as this one here, to try to knock those down and then allow that your turf to grow back into those areas. Again, this is not going to completely kill the Bahia grass, but it's going to minimize the plant, stress it enough where your turf can grow back into those spots. But for me, Bahia is not that bad. I'd be okay with having it in there if all I'm having to deal with are these little seed heads popping up. During the cool season, this has kind of been the one people have been calling about the most. Is this annual bluegrass or Poa annua. And this one is tough because the St. Augustine or Bermuda has gone dormant, so it's brown, and then this grass is green and it's kind of erratic. So this is more of just an aesthetic thing. If you keep it mowed down, it doesn't look terrible, but the way that we would take care of this is by doing some type of a pre-emergent weed killer in the fall before these seeds germinate, because as we can see from the picture, this produces quite a bit of seed head on there. Those seeds start to germinate in September and October, and then it's active over the winter. So if we can time this pre-emergent application early, we can get ahead of that, and we really start to slow this thing from growing in the yard. It's really the only thing to do. It's not very good post-emergent products for spraying this without impacting the health of your grass. Only thing we can do, we can keep it mowed so that we don't get these seed pods, and then we can do this pre-emergent early in the fall to minimize the seed germination. Some of our warm season grasses like Dallas grass and crabgrass are pretty nasty. We can spot spray right in the middle of this with a non-selective or a broad spectrum herbicide, and we just need to spot spray right in the middle, and then it'll kill the rest of this plant. This is one of those ones where this little hand weeder would come in handy, where we just pop right in the center and we twist it, dislodge the plant, and just pull it out of there. That's pretty easy if we're just looking at a couple of these plants versus us going out and getting herbicides to apply. But again, this one here is a reseeding annual. All these seeds drop into the soil, when the weather warms up in spring, the seeds germinate and they become monsters in the grass going into the summertime. So we would look at a pre-emergent again for like a February application to try to stop these ones from growing as the soil temperatures warm up. This one right here, sand burrs or sticker burrs, grass burrs, pretty nasty. One for this is minimizing those seeds from developing. So regular mowing is a good thing to do. We need to use some type of a grass catcher to catch those clippings so that we're removing those developing seed heads on the plant. But then again, a pre-emergent weed killer in February is going to kind of give us a blanket of protection so that this plant doesn't germinate as the soil warms up. Again, this is a warm season annual grass. So if we can stop it from growing from seed, we can eventually eliminate it. But it's so close to our other species of grass that we're growing. There's not really any selective products out there that aren't going to maybe impact our lawns. Again, when you go to the garden centers, pull that accordion label open. We look for those target species on the label, read through the label before purchasing, and then read it thoroughly again before applying. Make sure that we're not applying a product that's going to damage our turf grass. All right, let's get into some broadleaf stuff. So we're kind of all over the place with broadleaf weeds. We've got stuff that's easy to control, and then we've got stuff that's difficult to control. And that really is one that's annual or perennial. The stuff that's perennial here are your difficult and medium weeds, and the stuff that's easy tend to be our annual weeds. So best thing to do for those is just to keep them mowed down, stop them from going to seed, and then the problems will go away. It doesn't work that well when we have perennial weeds because they grow back every year from the same plant. So we have to start looking at some herbicides, making sure that we're applying those at the right time of year, so that we're impacting this weed, but we're not maybe hurting our grass at the same time. This one here is Lespedeza, and kind of grows down into the turf. The cool thing about this is one, it stays really low, and then it's also a legume. So legumes fix nitrogen, so it kind of creates nitrogen fertilizer for the grass. So this might be one I would just, if you keep the grass mowed regularly, you don't really notice it. It's not a big problem. It becomes a problem later if the grass declines for one reason or another. Maybe this is all you have left. We can treat this with a herbicide, or we can just raise the height on the mower blade a little bit, maybe try to shade this out and let the grass outcompete the weed. Henbit, a cool season weed, broadleaf weed here. Again, this is one that if we can just keep it mowed regularly and stop the seeds from developing on here, then year by year, that pressure is going to get less and less. We can come in here, mid-year and spot spray this with some herbicide to try to knock it back. But I would encourage you to look at just keeping it mowed, keeping it from growing from seed, and then maybe a pre-emergent application in the fall in September that's going to stop this from growing when it gets a little cooler in the winter. It's a pretty plant, but in this case, we would call it an undesirable plant in the lawn. But some people might think this is desirable. I do. I think it's pretty. Clovers, lots of different clovers, but this is kind of just our white New Zealand clover that we see right now. That's pretty prevalent. Again, we can start in the fall and try to get this before it germinates with the pre-emergent, or we can spot spray with this later on in the year with the post-emergent herbicide. Or the other thing is that as the temperatures warm up in summer, this plant seeds out like we see in the seed here, and then they kind of fall apart and die once it gets hot outside. So we could maybe say that, just keep it mowed down, and just deal with it. Other thing here is that, bees are really attracted to the clover flowers here, so they might, might use our turf area as a seasonal pollinator source for pollinators. This one here, there's a whole range of these different spurges. And spurge really pops up once the grass starts to really decline. So you've got a grass density issue. And then once you have some bare space on the soil, the spurge really likes to take advantage of those types of spaces. So best thing to do is just try to maintain a good healthy stand of turf grass and keep it growing tall, and you'll shade this weed out. If that doesn't work for you, the only other solution for this is going to be a post-emergent weed killer, whether it's a granule or a liquid form, spraying over this and knocking the weed back without damaging the turf grass, so the turf can kind of grow back over the top of it and shade any new populations of this weed from growing. Lots of options out there. There's a mile-long shelf of herbicides when we go to the box stores. Again, look at the label, read the label, making sure that this is the right product that you need, and then read the label, understand how to apply it safely in your yard. Stuff that we want to look for on a label, it's going to say for southern lawns or St. Augustine grass. Read it out, open it up and make sure it says St. Augustine or Bermuda or Zoysia, whatever species you have. Make sure that's on the label, because you can, some of these places will have the wrong stuff, maybe for northern grasses, and they will kill our warm season turf grasses real quick. There are products out there more and more that come in these combinations, so they'll have maybe 2 or 3 or 4 different modes of action within that weed killer. So it'll control a whole lot of different weeds. The thing on this that's important is look at the timing of the application, because some of these are going to, when you open it up, it's going to say, do not apply this product when the temperature is above 85 degrees. Well, when is it not above 85 degrees in Southeast Texas? So when you put that on, when we're up in the 90s, from June on to September, you're going to damage your turf grass. Okay. Because the grass is more susceptible to the damage when we get into warmer temperatures. Okay. So be real careful with these types of products when we get into warmer weather. Just don't use them. If it looks like the right product, make sure that we're within that window of temperature. Again, we've got a couple other different weeds here. This one here, a little dayflower, it's kind of a monster. And it has a pretty extensive root system. You can dig this up with a hand trowel. Probably going to be your easiest bet, just to pull that root base up from the ground, versus using a herbicide. Maybe not the right choice. These ones right here, sedges. So our nut sedges are pretty common in our wet areas of the lawn. We can note that they're sedges versus grasses because all sedges have this triangular stem. Once we cut that with a knife, it's triangulated at the bottom. There are products, this Ortho nut sedge killer, Image, Sedge Hammer, that are specific to sedges. Again, these are selective herbicides, but read the label, because there's going to be some stuff on the label about temperature, moisture requirements, or restrictions. When it gets real hot, we start applying these products on our lawn, it really starts burning and yellowing the grass. And so we're just causing more stress to the plant, to the grass plant, and then we're just going to have more problems after the fact. So always read the label. There's some great products out there, but they do have limitations. And here's a package of that sedge hammer. Again, here's a grassy area that has a bunch of sedge growing into it. Can be pretty nasty. This is a weed. The sedges and the kalingas are weeds that really like a lot of moisture. So if there's a way we can cut the irrigation back or increase the efficacy of the drainage in the lawn, then these products, these diseases, I'm sorry, this particular weed will minimize. If we don't create that growing environment that the plant wants, it will minimize on its own. So cut the watering back, improve the drainage, and we'll see these things kind of go away. This one here, again, like I mentioned, this was one of probably thousands of horror stories where a person grabbed a product they thought was what they needed, they put it out and they killed the grass. Okay, because it wasn't product that was labeled for warm season turf grass. So you don't trust the businesses. You need to trust yourself that you'll turn this bag around and you'll read the label, make sure that it has the turf grass that you have, and make sure you understand all the restrictions on application, temperature range, soil moisture, all that. Make sure you read it. If it's not on there and it's not clear, don't buy it and don't use it. Again, when we get into this, healthy lawn through mowing, irrigating, and proper fertilization is going to be better than using any of the chemical treatments. And again, understand the difference between pre-emergence and post-emergence on the weed killer selection that you choose. All right, insects. Let's roll through insects here. These are our monsters right here: grubs, chinch bugs, sod webworms, and fall armyworms. Stressed lawns are more susceptible to all of these. So if we can increase the health of the turf grass, make it vigorous and resilient, it can really fight off these things pretty well. But there's always exceptions to the rule. So the first one here, grubs. If you've got a night light on your back porch right now, you're seeing all these June bugs or May beetles or Japanese beetles flying around. They're trying to get in your hair when you come in the back door at night, making the children scream. That's the adult of this white grub. So basically they're flying around this time of year, they're mating, and then they will be depositing those eggs in the soil, which will turn into grubs that start off small, as you can see in the picture, and they end up getting about the size of the end of your thumb at maturity, and then they pupate or metamorphosize into the adult beetle in the spring of next year, and then they fly around and do the same thing. So with this one, we'll see some yellowing mottled areas in the grass. It doesn't kill the grass because they're just feeding on the root system. It's very temporary. So we can almost say we could leave it alone. But if you dig down the soil and you see a handful of grubs in one little sample, then we might want to treat those with a chemical application, or there are some organic products that people are trying, including these beneficial nematodes that we can apply in liquid form to the soil, and then they will mine through the soil and find these grubs and impact them before they complete their life cycle. Chinch bugs, this is really our monster when we get into bugs, because as you can see in this picture on the left, we have a beautiful green grass next to a grass that looks like you poured gasoline on it. This is what happens in midsummer once the temperatures really start spiking. It's droughty, it's hot. That's when the chinch bug likes to be active. They start in one area and they reproduce, and then they move out in all different directions, and they basically kill all the grass that they feed on. The chinch bugs create an enzyme. They push that enzyme into the grass to break down the cells, and then they slurp up the cells. But that enzyme that they inject into the grass is basically like a weed killer. The plant is allergic to it. It's toxic to the plant, and so it kills it completely. So if you see an area like you went on vacation, before you left, the grass was green, you come back and there's this huge area that's completely dead in the middle of summer, probably is chinch bugs. We can see here with this dime all the different sizes of the chinch bugs from the nymphs to the adults. Very small, but they are visible from with the naked eye. So I like to put a little water, take the water hose on an area, kind of right between this yellow and green grass in the bottom right corner. Saturate that with water, and the chinch bugs will rise up onto the leaf blades. And all you have to see is one. If you see one adult chinch bug, it means that they're probably laying eggs, they're reproducing, and they're going to end up causing some damage. So what do we do? One, we need to find the chinch bug. Okay. So again, I need to positively identify that I have a chinch bug there. When I see this first little area of discolored grass, if I find the chinch bugs in there, I'm just going to treat that little area. I'm going to put some type of a broad spectrum insecticide, and probably in a liquid form, right over that area, and knock back that active population. I'm not going to go out and treat the whole yard. I'm just going to go out and treat those little spots early on before they get out of hand. Because, the cool thing about nature, there might be a couple chinch bugs in here, but there's probably some spiders and some other beetles in there that might end up feeding on these things. And so if I just broad spectrum put a product across the yard, killing all my beneficials, and that means that the problem is going to get worse next time around. So I'm just going to spot treat right in this little area, and I'm going to knock back that little active population. And I'm just going to keep looking, every couple mornings. I'm going to go out and I'm going to scout the area for grass that maybe doesn't look right, and then try to figure out what's going on in there. And this kind of shows you, we have this tin can approach. Honestly, this is simple, but it's kind of overkill. Put the water hose out there, let the grass get saturated, and those chinch bugs, they don't like water. They will rise up onto the leaf blades, and they kind of sit up on top of the leaf blades like, help, we're wet. And you can see them with the eye, identify that shape to them, and then you can come back and you can control all these right here are these spot treat products. But liquid forms are great for this because we're actually getting contact with the pest. Just spot spray right in that little area and knock back the population, and you should be in good shape. Sod webworms, these are in the fall. Temperature cools off. Grass is looking really nice because it's the end of summer, and so it's starting to come back to life. And all of a sudden, you see these patches that look really nasty. And you get down in there and you see these little moths, little grayish colored moths fluttering around in the evening, or you see this nasty little caterpillar feeding down in the soil. Again, on this, lots of different options. I would encourage this Bacillus thuringiensis or BT. With the BT, we can spray that on the plant, and then any type of lepidopteran, which is like this little caterpillar here, that is feeding on the grass. It actually has to feed on the grass and ingest the BT, will kill it. But it doesn't necessarily harm any other species that's not actually feeding on that grass. So that's a more organic, a more natural way to control this. But these ones here at the top are going to be more of a broad spectrum insecticide that we would spray over the top to try to knock back these populations. Noting that we're also knocking back maybe any beneficials that are in the soil. And the last one on these is this fall armyworm. Same time frame. This kind of grayish white moth, you'll see it a little bit larger. It'll be flying around in the evening, around the lawn. And then you start to see a gazillion of these caterpillars basically just wiping out the grass completely. Probably more common on Bermuda grasses because they prefer eating Bermuda because the stems are smaller. You can also see it on St. Augustine though. Once these caterpillars are fully mature, they're easy to spot with the naked eye because they are quite large. You'll see them moving around on the ground surface. And so again, a BT or Bacillus thuringiensis application is pretty good if you catch them early, because there has to be grass there that they're feeding on and ingesting that bacterium. If we waited too long and they've really munched off most of the grass, you might have to resort to more of this broad spectrum insecticide after the fact. But main thing with all these is just scouting, looking early, you see an area of the grass that maybe doesn't look right. It's yellow, it's sparse. Catch it early before it becomes a big problem. If you've waited till this pest has just devoured your lawn, then you really waited too long. There's not a whole lot of options to try to get that grass growing back. I think I showed this briefly last time. It's a good idea, whether it's just in a notebook or if it's on some type of a spreadsheet, is for you create some type of an annual schedule, shows the things that you've done in your yard, kind of helps you start to develop some type of maybe a calendar, or maybe it's also considerations of things that you need to be thinking about at certain times of the year. And then maybe how you want to tweak those or adjust the timing of those each year to try to get your management schedule on point. Okay, well, that gets us close to the end here. I'm gonna stay on after we finish this. I've got a couple websites that I'd like to show you just to kind of guide you to where you'll find some great resources for all this, so that later on you can kind of do a little bit of deeper dive and deeper study into where to find these things. So if you start dealing with an issue, you'll know where to go to validate that that's what your problem is and your steps to help remedy that. But in the meantime, let me show this, and I will entertain any questions that we have at the moment.
Okay, Boone. I think I might have butchered the last question I asked. Skip Griffin, did you want to unmute and ask Boone your question if you're still here?
What was that question again?
It was about the dogs.
Oh,
I think I butchered his question and didn't ask the correct question. He might not be here anymore. Or maybe it was answered.
He's still here. I believe the question was, the grass is already destroyed. He has fenced off the area to keep the dogs out. What to do now to handle the areas that are bare soil?
okay, good. Okay, so the pet's moved on. Now we can fix the spot. If we don't take the pet off the site, we don't really make any traction with this. So in those, you got the lanes where the dogs like to move. Aeration probably is going to be step one in those spots, because we have a lot of compaction, because it might have rained, the irrigation system went, and the dog's running out there and they're compacting that ground, and that's really why the grass starts to minimize in those spots. So we want to aerate. So we're removing some of that soil, alleviating that compaction in those spots, and really just put a layer of compost, good quality compost. Put about ½ inch of that over those bare areas after we've done the aeration. And I think you'd be surprised how quick that surrounding turf grass outside of those trails will send runners, rhizomes and stolons back into those bare spots. But that compost kind of helps to create some organic environment with some humus on there on the top. It helps to cool the soil, keep it moist, and so allows those runners to move back into that spot. But the first step that's important is that aeration, so we can first off alleviate that compaction of the soil, and then with time that soil will improve and the grass will grow back into those spots.
Boone, can you also talk about dollar weed and dichondra, please?
Okay, so both of these are very closely related. They're a plant that has this circular or heart-shaped leaf. The thing that they have in common with nutsedge is that they like water. Okay, it's an aquatic plant. It grows in standing water and bog type riparian situations. So if it's doing really good in your yard, you've created a bog. So being cognizant of that and cutting back the water significantly, improving the drainage of those areas significantly, we start to minimize that environment that plant wants, and it'll struggle. It's not going to kill the weed, but it's going to struggle as long as we have an area there that has good fertility, good sunlight, and a lot of water. That dollarweed and dichondra are going to grow. So cut back the watering, minimize the irrigation, improve the drainage, and once you've done that, then we maybe look at coming over the top of that with a selective liquid herbicide that's labeled for southern lawns, that has dichondra or dollarweed on the label, following the label instructions, and use that to knock that weed back. But if we don't address the water and the drainage, you'll never get rid of it.
Okay, I don't understand the question. Can Rekha Patel unmute and ask your question? Also, if anybody has any questions, feel free to unmute and ask your question at this time.
Can somebody come and check my loan and keep the schedule, make the schedule for fertilizer? Do you have any service like that?
So I'm gonna go to a website here in a second that will show you a bunch of resources. What I would recommend is our Master Gardener help desk that we have here in Fort Bend County. So if you just go to our Master Gardener website, which is fbmg.org, they can put that in the chat for you here. When you get in there, go to contact us, and that'll give you all the information for our help desk. And so what we do there is we want you to take pictures of the lawn, where it doesn't look great, what type of weeds we've got, areas where it's thin, take pictures of all that, send it to our help desk. We'll try to identify what's going on, and we'll share resources with you to help get you on the right track. But here in a second, I'm going to show you what some of those websites look like, so you'll know where to find the information at.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other? Oh, Donna, you can ask a question.
Real quick, what is the weed that's really kind of long, trailing, sticky, and leaves like little kind of green peas all over your socks and shoes?
It's probably
sticky. It's real sticky.
Well, there's a couple there. There's a shepherd's purse, but this one that's usually there's bed straw.
I can comb it with my hands and grab up a lot of it. So it's not totally embedded deeply in the ground, but it spreads like crazy. My entire backyard was covered with it this year.
Okay. Is it in the cool season or in the warm season?
It shows up at the very beginning of spring.
Okay. So there's a weed that's called bed straw, and it's really sticky. Kids like to grab it and they'll throw it at each other. It sticks on their back type thing. That's what it is. Again, this is one that's just a reseeding annual, and so it germinates once the temperatures start cooling off at the end of summer. And so a pre-emergent weed killer, granular applied to the lawn in September, is going to stop those weeds from germinating early in the winter. And then they grow in the lawn, and then once it kind of warms up just a little bit in spring, they really start growing quickly. So we're just trying to time a weed killer in the fall to stop them from growing in the first place. The other thing is just mowing it down. So mowing with a bagger towards the back end of winter to just pick up a lot of that residue and stop them from going to seed. If it is the bed straw, that's what it sounds like it is. Going into the warm
I
season,
needed a name so I can Google it. Bed straw. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
And Peggy said maybe Velcro weed.
It's probably the same as another common name for the same species.
Okay. Any recommendations for aeration frequency?
Once every 2 years in spring. So what I like to do is about the time that our grass is starting to wake up around April 1st, start the year with a low mowing. So we're bringing the height down a little bit. We're putting the bagger on the mower, and we're trying to collect a lot of that winter thatch and get it out of there. And then right after you do that, go ahead and aerate at that moment. And I think you're getting the most out of the aeration when you do it at that time. And then maybe following the aeration with a light application of compost spread across the grass surface, because that we can get that compost to move down into those holes that have been created, and that allows some organic matter to move down into the profile. And so we're going to get a longer action out of the decompaction of the soil. So, late March, early April, probably once every 2 years.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Oh, how do you get rid of yellow wood sorrel?
Okay, so we have this is really oxalis. So we have yellow, and then we have the pink wood sorrel or oxalis, and the pink one is pretty hard to get rid of. The yellow is not so much. I think just either hand digging those small patches early in the year, just grubbing those up, or just spot treating those small populations of those with a selective weed killer is going to be your best option. Is to try to grab those weeds before they get large, because the wood sorrels or the oxalis, as they get bigger, the crown of the plant underground starts to create these little asexual propagules. They're like little babies. They're cloned babies of the plant. And if we leave that plant in there long enough, all those little clone babies in the soil break loose in the soil and spread out. So instead of having one little plant, now we have 50, and then we have this larger thing to deal with. So as you start to see those little oxalis early in the year, is either spot spray those quickly, or just get in there with a hand trowel. I like the little Japanese gardening knives they call a hori hori. Those are awesome because I can find that little wood sorrel, dig straight down and pry a little bit and pull that plant up out of the ground, removing the plant along with all those little babies that are growing around the bottom. If you just grab it and pull the top part of the plant, you haven't really accomplished much, because the root is still down there and it's still creating all those little babies underground.
Back to aerating. Do you recommend a pitchfork?
No, and I covered this last time. So we have a spike aerator that goes down and just kind of like pushes a void, and that's what a pitchfork would do, pushes a void down in there. But that's very temporary, because as soon as the ground gets moist again, that clay is going to expand and just fill those pores. So we haven't really accomplished much there long term. We want to use an aerator that has a core a hollow core on it. So when we go down and it comes back up, pulls that little core out and deposits that on the surface. And now we've created a pore down into the soil that's going to stay there for a longer period of time, where we actually have the rest of that soil. It kind of breathes, once we create those pores, it breathes, it stretches out. And so it alleviates the greater compaction of the whole surface. But if we're just dabbing it with some type of a tine or a pitchfork, we're really not accomplishing anything that's long term.
Can you comment on humates versus aeration?
I think they're both tools in the toolbox that are important. So anything that's humic acid or humates basically is just alluding that we have some organic biological action within the soil. So anything that we're doing that's improving that is a good thing. And it can easily be done with compost applications. I think is probably the most effective, because those, for this biological activity to happen, we have to have organic matter for those microorganisms to feed on. So, but just by adding a compost on the surface, those things that you'll buy in these liquid forms of humates or humic acids, they're already in the soil. We just need to feed them. And so what we feed them with is organic matter. And I think you get the most bang for your buck out of compost to do that. The aeration is important, probably for a different reason, is that we're allowing more porosity down deeper into the soil to help break up that compaction. I don't think that humates can do it alone. I think the aeration is important and part of that process to help that penetration to get water and to get nutrients and air down into the soil.
Okay, do you have a good chemical recommendation for dollarweed, and when is the best time to apply?
When you go to the garden centers, you're going to find a full range of different products. I mentioned during the presentation that you're going to find some of these that are going to have multi-active ingredients within a single product, usually in a liquid form. I would choose one that is in a concentrate that you're mixing up and you're putting into some type of a pump up sprayer yourself, like a 1 gallon pump up sprayer, and just use that as a spot treatment in the areas that you have the dollarweed and you're trying to focus contact on the plant itself. And I say that because these products that are effective on dollarweed, our turf species are pretty sensitive to it. So if we're just doing spraying this across the whole yard and we don't need it, there's no dollarweed there, we're causing harm to that grass unintentionally and unnecessarily. That maybe we'll have more weed pressure later on because that grass has been stressed out. So find a product that says dollarweed on the label. Again, it's going to be one of these. It's going to have maybe 3 or 4 different active ingredients in there together. But most importantly is follow the label instructions, because all of these are going to have some type of a temperature warning. Once we get above 85 to 90 degrees, we can start causing harm to our turf grass. And again, going back to the dollarweed, the thing that's probably most important with that is cut back the watering, because it's a plant that likes this boggy, wetland type environment. And everywhere you go, if you see dollarweed that's real happy, it's in this swampy, wet area where we put too much water on it. So cut back the water, cut back the fertilization, and you'll see the problem with that dollarweed start to minimize.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Boone, for our part 2 for the landscape success class. We have put in the chat links for our survey, which we would appreciate you filling out. And that's also on the screen right now. There's also a link in the chat. We've also added the help desk information. If you have any questions at any time, you can call the help desk and Master Gardeners will help you with any question you may have. If you do call the help desk, we prefer that you have pictures that you can also send. So maybe have that ready. I've also put in the chat the link to the rest of our landscape success classes for 2024. We hope that you will attend them. They all have a lot of very good information. And if you will, again, fill out the survey. And we thank everyone for being here today and joining us.
And real quick before we go, I mentioned a couple of these sites that
Oh, yes.
that's good for you to look at. Let me close this the PowerPoint here real quick, and I'm just going to go through these briefly. And then what I think might be good, Rochelle, is that when we do the follow-up email next week to everybody, that we just include a list of these links in there, so that they can review those later on if they went ahead and left already. Is that okay?
Yes, we will do that. Thank you.
Okay. Let me oh, hold on. I want to share. There we go. Okay, so I'm gonna share. I'm going to close that. Okay. So let's go here. All right. And let's move that back down. Okay. First one here is aggieturf.tamu.edu. This is our Texas A&M turf grass education site. There's a ton of information on here. Once I scroll down, we've got information on grass species, weeds, insects, glossary, and this publications. Publications, I think, is the most important thing here because we've got a lot of really cool stuff. We have this section on cultural management, on weed control. So all of our weeds that we have problems with. We've got some individual publications on those. And we've got insect control, disease control, lawn management calendars for Bermuda grass and St. Augustine grass. And then this back here at the bottom, this other publications is weed, insect, and disease control for turf grass. This is a huge publication, but this is where you find all the details of specific active ingredients of all these types of chemicals that would be appropriate for different uses. So tons of cool stuff here. I won't dive into it today, but it's a good site to just go into later on at your convenience. Next one that I alluded to here is our diagnostic lab. And this one here is plantclinic.tamu.edu. And this one here is where we're going to look at diseases. So we've got this section here that shows fact sheets and disease handbooks for all types of different plant diseases. And then it has the submission forms on here to show us how to take a sample of a plant that looks diseased, how to package that and send that to the lab for analysis. So great website here, great tool, especially if we have one of these diseases that we're warranting a diagnosis prior to recommending any type of chemical application, that's something that was going to cost you a lot of time and money. This here, soiltesting.tamu.edu is our soil and water testing laboratory website. And this is, so if you want to test your soil for your pH and your nutrient content, this is where you do it. We click on soil testing and we'll go down here to urban and small area soil testing. We can download the form, shows you how to conduct the sample, send it to the lab, and then they're going to give you some type of analysis and recommendation on fertilization in response to needs of minerals within your soil. This one here is called texaset.tamu.edu. And this is one of two tools here that's going to help people understand how much to be watering, how much we need to water the plants throughout the year. And so if we just go to the website, it shows you different areas across the state, like Richmond here. And so it's going to go over all of our environmental parameters. That helps you kind of understand if we need to be watering our grass or not. This site here is pretty applicable for irrigators, but maybe for a homeowner, this might have a little bit more information that you're needing. So they created this website. This is called watermyyard.org. Watermyyard.org. When I go to the website, basically, I just put in my go on here and I put in my zip code. This is for Fulshire 441. And pretty quickly here, it says that this week I need 0.33 inches of water. One watering for 39 minutes is going to get the job done. So this website here kind of takes all that evapotranspiration data, weather data, and it puts it in a form here. It just basically tells you how much we need to be watering to keep our plants happy. So you can do this individually, or you can sign up here with your email, and this will send you a weekly analysis, just kind of giving you an idea how much water needs to be applied in the lawn. So pretty cool stuff. So all these, Rochelle, I think the soil testing, the Water My Yard, the Plant Disease Diagnostic Lab, and the AgriTurf website will be ones that let's add into our response email next week so that they have those websites.
Okay.
All right.
Okay, well, the video has been recorded and anybody who has registered for the class will receive an email with the link to the recording so you can reference it again. And we will send out these links with everybody. One more question regarding watering. Good for lawns, but with trees, shouldn't more water be used?
So I think the answer to this is when we get into like our drought last summer, we need to be thinking about more regular or deeper irrigation in the yard areas to be able to be enough that's going to penetrate through the grass zone down to the active root zone of those trees. But unless we're in this extreme drought type situation, the water that we're applying to the grass is going to equal roughly the amount of additional irrigation or water that's needed for the trees and shrubs in those areas. Only if we're, the trees are really suffering, then we need to start thinking about ways that we can apply additional water that's going to penetrate down deeper into the soil to be enough to help those trees.
Okay, we do have another question. What are your thoughts on the, I don't know, Rachio water controller, RACHIO?
Yeah, I think we had this question on the last presentation. So some of these modern smart controllers for irrigation are going to bring in some of this weather data from the local weather stations and adjust the watering. So I think that's a great idea. There's probably a little bit of homework on all these because they're not completely foolproof that they're connecting to a valid weather data source. So probably a little bit of homework there to make sure that they're getting the correct information, because some of these, if your controller is tied to a weather station over at Sugar Land Airport, and for some reason it's not working correctly, it might be giving the wrong data set to your controller. And so it's not going to be applying the right amount. So probably, maybe every couple months, it would be a good idea to validate that weather data source that you have connected to your controller is working correctly. Mhm. I see the comment there, and that's true. You can, the smart where it goes automated, you can override that as needed, but ultimately, knowing that the weather station and the weather data set that it's getting is valid, is important. Because you're trusting that's working instead of trusting the old type controllers where you're programming it yourself. So both of those, have their strengths and then their potential negatives.
Okay, I think that's all the questions.
Did I answer all your questions, Rochelle?
Yes, I believe we did.
I'm gonna see pictures of your lawn, how good it looks next year.
Well, I don't know about that. I have a lot of shade in my front yard.
Well, let's figure out how to get everything worked out right. I want you to get yard of the month.
I've been trying for 22 years, so
Well,
we'll
we're
see.
all right. Let's work towards that. That'll be our goal.
That's my goal. That's my goal. Yes.
Sounds great.
Okay, well, we will stop the recording and